We discussed about working with services, how we can create and work with HTTP service. Now, after understanding service, I told you that we need to know about forms in order to handle post and other operations. So we will see how do we deal with the forms. Actually, in Angular, as I already told you yesterday, forms are classified into two types. We have template driven. So we have model driven. Model driven, or they are also called as reactive forms. Reactive forms. What is template driven? First we will see that. Template driven forms, what is the concept of template driven form is, forms are configured at UI level. The forms are configured at UI level, and all form interactions and validations are handled in UI, in user interface. That means the complete configuration of form is done in UI level. Means UI level means it is in the HTML. We can call it as view because we are using MVC approach or MVVM approach. Everything is at the view level. That means configuring the form, interacting with the form, everything happens in UI level. Only controller is used to collect data from form. Only collecting data from form is done by controller. Rest of all interactions are handled at UI level. So designing the form, validating the form, everything happens in HTML. Only collecting data and sending the data to API is managed by controller. So what is good, what is bad with this template approach? Good is it reduces the number of requests. It reduces the number of requests and improves page load time. So it reduces the number of requests and improves the page load time. Because already we learned that if we are managing requests between controller and view, controller means the TS file, the HTML file, the number of requests will increase. So if number of requests increase, close that. If number of requests increase, then the page load time will increase. To handle that, we can use template forms. But problem with template form is, so it makes heavy on user interface. Because if you design everything in UI, obviously user interface becomes heavy. Initial load time is improved, but render time is increased. Render time is increased. That means initially load time we are reducing, but when you are handling interactions, rendering will be slow. Why rendering will be slow? Because lot of user interface and heavy interface. Everything is configured in the interface only. And not only that, if everything you configured in UI, it is hard to extend. It is not easy for extending the form. That means if your form is changing regularly with new fields, new features, then it is not good idea to go with the template forms. Because if everything is designed in UI, you cannot edit UI every time. It is very difficult to extend UI. Not only hard to extend, it is hard to test. Because separation issues will come. If everything is embedded in user interface, separating and testing will be difficult. Because you are integrating the logic, validation, the interface, everything at one place. So it will be obviously hard for extending. It will be hard for testing. Then when it is good, so if you want, that means template forms, template driven is good for forms when a stable functionality is required. A stable functionality is required and doesn't require regular extensions. In that case, better you can go with template. That means you are designing a form. That form will not be changing regularly. It will have standard stable functionality every time. Just like you are using a login form. A login form always contains the standard fields, user ID, password, forgot password. So anything else, no extensions, nothing. In that case, better you can go with template. Registration form will be not good idea. Why? Because in registration form, you are giving lot of choices. And for example, if user selects that I am not from India, then he need to change the form. User selects I am from this city, and we need to change the form according to city. In that case, template forms are not great, because forms will keep changing depending on location, depending on various criteria. In that case, we cannot use template driven forms. That means new features must be added into form according to the client location or according to the client criteria. So in that case, we have to use model driven forms. Model driven forms, later we will see how to handle them. Template driven forms are good if you are not looking for regular extensions with a stable functionality. So majority everything will be performed in the UI level only. Already we saw this. Already we used template forms. We discussed MVVM architecture, if you remember. When we discussed MVVM architecture, we designed a form, configured everything in UI only. That is a template form actually. So we already learned template form. But more details we will see here, how we can configure template form. So in template form, the library required for template driven forms is, so we need Angular forms library. So in this, to configure form and form controls, so you need to configure form and form controls, you need forms module. Already we have that. When we discussed about two-way binding, data binding, we imported forms module into app module. Forms module is not available by default with the Angular library, right? We have to additionally add this. So, and form is configured by using ng form. Form is configured by using ng form. Form elements are configured by using ng model. We already know this. Form is configured by using ng form. The elements are configured by using ng model. So syntactically, already we saw that suppose we have a form. So we are designing a form. This form can be made dynamic by using a name, ng form. And it should have a reference name. So that means generally we give reference name like this, hash FRM register. FRM register, that is the reference name, and it should be ng form. That means it should be treated as form. That means now the form name in the memory is FRM register. And the memory is allocated for the form by using ng form. The memory reference is FRM register. That means form related all the data you can access by using FRM register. So if you want to define elements, suppose we have a text box, already we know that this will have a name, suppose username, it will have ng model, and it will have hash username is equal to ng model. Already we done this. This is what we discussed while working with MVVM approach, right? Everything we configured in the UI level. So this is how we define the controls. Every control is configured with ng model, and memory is allocated for the control. Whatever the values of the control are stored under the reference of username. Right, this is the basic design of form. That means form is configured with the reference ng form. Elements are configured by using ng model. That means we don't need anything in the controller. Everything configured in the UI only. Why we need controller? Just to collect the data and post into any API. So every validation, everything we can configure here itself. We will see that. So let's see one small example here. So let's create a new component here. So I will create a new component, ng generate component template form, skip this. Okay. I am creating a component called template form. Okay, let's keep this in the startup. So in app module, I am keeping this template form component in the startup. In index, I will make it in the startup template form. Okay. So the template form is ready. Localhost, yeah. The template form is working fine. Now let's see how to design a form. So go to the components. In that we have template form HTML. I don't need to do anything in the controller, everything in the view. So here I am just designing a container, and here we are defining a registration form, register some product or something like this. We are defining register user. Now in this we have to configure a form, then we have to write form. This is the form. This is a HTML form. Now how to make it dynamic so that Angular can take control over it? For that we have to use an ng form. But in order to use ng form, you have to make sure that, so you have imported the forms module. In app module. Actually, in app module, forms module is already imported. We done that at the time of data binding. So now we need a reference name for this. What is it? Hash FRM register is equal to that ng form. That means it is configured as a form. After configuring this as a form is an empty container. In that we need some controls, right? I will create a data list, data term. So username and data definition. Here we are using input type is equal to text. Then how do we configure it dynamically? We have to first define a name. Name is compulsory because as per the standards of HTML, form cannot submit the value of any element if there is no name. So it is compulsory that every form element must have a name. So, and I given user name. And we have to allocate memory for this to store the values and handle this control. So then we have to configure as ng model. ng model allocates memory for this element. But in the memory, what should be the reference name? We have to define that. In the memory, what should be the reference name? The reference name should be user name. Usually the reference name should be the same as the name, what name you have configured. And here the username is going to allocate that reference in the model here. That means first memory is allocated. In that memory, in this reference name, all the data of this text box will be stored. It will be stored. That means now similarly this is user name. Similarly, I am using some another data term. Suppose mobile. Just I am using some mobile and another data definition. Input type is equal to text. Name is equal to mobile and ng model and hash mobile is equal to ng model. That's how we configure. So we are defining some details. We are configuring some details. And as I already told you that any element can be configured in this way. That means it can be a checkbox, radio button, drop downs, everything is configured as model. Suppose see, I am taking here another data term, suppose city. And this time I am using a drop down, even if it is a drop down with option some Delhi, with option some Hyderabad like this. And even it is a drop down, we have to configure a name and we have to configure ng model. We should configure a reference name. Reference name is city is equal to ng model. All are in the same way. All are configured in the same way. So as for example here, so another option, suppose I am giving as subscription. So want subscriptions, something like this. So here I will put a data definition. So data definition, and here I am creating a checkbox. We have a modern checkbox, you know, we can use form switch, right? And we can use input type is equal to checkbox, input type checkbox, and it is configured with name is equal to subscribe. And here I will put the value as yes, and for this I will put a class called form check input, and this is having ng model, and again hash, it is subscribe is equal to ng model. So this is the form, and you can see this is the form. So we have a text box, we have mobile, we have city, So here we have subscription, yes or no. You can choose. It is a checkbox. I am using Bootstrap form switcher, which will make the checkbox look like a switch. We are just defining yes, no. Now, very important, we have a button, so register. So the button register, and we want this button class btn primary like this. Now all this is configured and it is ready. Now very important is how to collect the data from this. Whatever data entered inside this, we can collect individually. We can collect individually what we want, or we can easily collect all the form data. Actually, so this point we learned, that means form is configured with ng form and the elements are configured by using ng model. Now here form comprises of, means we can say ng form. ng form comprises of so following a lot of attributes are there, comprises of following attributes, following properties. Form contains lot of properties. One important property is value. One important property is value. Actually, value is an object. Value is an object that contains information about every element in form and its value. That means this value is a member of this ng form. This value is an object which contains information about every element in the form and its value. That means when I access this value, it will return an object in this way. In this object, it contains every element name and its value. That means what elements we are having? We are having user name. And what value it is having, whatever value you entered inside it. That means the element name and its value is collected by using this. How many elements are there? It can collect everything now. That means it can collect mobile and whatever the value of mobile. So some mobile value is there, it will collect that value. All the form related data you can collect by using value. Form related data we can collect by using value. And form not only value, it contains validation properties. The form contains validation properties. So validation properties I will tell you in a separate point. We will discuss in a separate point. So currently, what is the property we have? Value. So validation properties we will see. What are the validation properties in separate? Actually, validation properties we have like pristine. We have like dirty. We have like valid. We have like invalid. We have like submitted. These are all the validation properties. Why they are used, how they are used, I will show you in validation part, right? Initially, how do you collect the form data? That means generally, whenever user submits the form, how to collect the form data? I hope you know already that every form submits its data. Every form submits its data on form submit event. Am I right? On submit event. Every form submits its data on submit event. You know that. That means every form submits on submit. That means here in Angular, we use form submit. Submit, it can call any method. So it can call any method. And into the method, how to send all the data. Into the method or how to send all the data. That means form name dot value. Already we saw that form name have a property called value. What this value will do, it will send all the details. That means the form name and value, it is going to send all the details. Angular have another technique. Angular introduced another option, that is ng submit. ng submit also will do the same thing. That means you can submit and you can configure the form name dot value. Angular latest versions provided this ng submit from Angular 9 and higher versions. Earlier we don't have this. This what is difference, I will tell you. Actually, this is general DOM event. That means this is general browser event. And this is the Angular submit event. What is the advantage of Angular submit event is, this is asynchronous, it is synchronous. That means if you want to submit the form in an asynchronous way, that means along with the other requests, if you want to handle it, then better go with ng submit. This is a synchronous method. When it is submitting the form, it will block all other requests. If you want to submit along with other requests, then you can go with ng submit. So submit is sync, and ng submit is asynchronous. So implicitly it is designed with sync and asynchronous technique, how you want to submit the form, right? So we can technically handle the form submitting by using the submit event. So let's see how it works, how it is handled, right? And one more, I hope everybody knows that form can be submitted only on submit button click. Am I right? Submit button type. Submit button click. That means suppose you have a button. So you have a button whose type is button. That means it cannot submit the form. It cannot submit form. So to submit the form, you know that the button type must be submit. By default, if you don't write the type, it will be submit. It is submit on. By default in HTML, if you don't give type submit, by default it is submit. If you don't define submit, it is submit. If you define button type as button or reset, then it is cannot submit. For example, if you are using input type is equal to button, this cannot submit. It cannot submit the form. So you can submit the form only when the input type is what? Submit. Only when input type. Anyhow, those are old HTML version. HTML5 uses button, right? You can use that. So now see how to collect the data from this form, how we can collect the data. Let's go to the controller. In the controller, we have to just create a method as a submit click. That is the method. On submit click, we are expecting the data from the form, which is an object type. That means we are expecting data in any type because it is an object. Okay. How to send all the form data? So just you have to use the submit event. You can use the submit event. So we will write submit click, and into that we need to pass the current form related all data. then we can do that by using FRM register dot value. FRM register dot value, it is going to submit. Now remember, this is an object. This object sends all control names and their values. So we have to just collect it here and we will send to API. Later we will send to API. Now we will temporarily write alert JSON.stringify, which converts into JSON. Which one? Data. Whatever data comes, we will convert into JSON and try to display here. Let's see here. That means in the controller, we are just collecting the data from form. Entire form is configured and designed in UI. That means user interface becomes very heavy. Rendering becomes heavy. It will take more time in rendering, presenting the output, because a lot of happening in the UI. It becomes heavy on UI. In the controller, you have just only one thing, collecting the data. Now you see here, I am entering the name, I am entering the mobile, some mobile, and here I am selecting some city. I am choosing the subscription, yes, and I click on register. The data is submitted here. That means the username, the mobile, the city, the subscribe, true or false, everything. Later you will learn how to post this data into database. We will see that. But collecting data from form, designing a form, this is important. That means first you have to learn how to design a form, how to collect the data from the form, and how do we submit. Suppose we want to collect only few details from the form. That means, for example, I want only this username. Then how to send it? I want to send only username. Then how do we send it? For example, here I am defining username dot value. Username dot value. Username dot value, and username dot value means you are sending only username. If I am sending username, only username, right? I am sending only username. That means here I entered some details and click on register. You can see it is unable to submit. So it is unable to submit. Suppose you see here we have an issue. So you see it is unable to submit. So, and see the point, it have a problem in converting to JSON. Converting to JSON. That means you can see that. Suppose I am saying username dot value. Username dot value. I entered some name and click on submit. It collects that value. Username is a field, right? That field you cannot submit. You have to submit its value. That means every element value you can individually submit. But this is difficult. We want to submit entire form data. Individually you can collect this. Individually we can collect this. If I want to submit an entire form data, FRM register dot value. Suppose I want to collect individual data and display. For example, I will put here, I will cut this and I will keep a div. In that we will put a class as row. In this we will put a div class as column 3, col 3, and here another div. This is class as col 9, like this. And here we are keeping the form. Here it is register in this column, and here we will keep heading. So as details, whatever the details they are entering, we want to display them beside. Then how to collect from every field individually, already we learned that. So suppose I want to collect the username. How to collect the username? Here we have to access the field. What is the field? username dot value. Form dot value will return all the form fields. Any specific field name dot value, it will return only the field. Similarly, other details like we have some mobile, and here we are accessing mobile dot value. So here every form contains these properties. Similarly, every model also contains, that means ng model comprises of following properties. What are the properties? We have value, we have same like pristine, we have like dirty, so we have like valid, we have like invalid, so we have like touched, we have like untouched, we have like errors, extra, we have so many things here. What are those? You will learn. Only value is currently required. Value is nothing but gets the element value. You can access element value, so by using this value. What are others? We will see. Those are a part of validation, right? Initially, we can access that here. Similarly, same thing, data term, city. How do we access city? We are using city dot value. City is a drop down. Similarly, data term, suppose subscribe. So, and here we will put an expression. If subscribe dot value is equal to true, because it returns true, then subscribed, and say not subscribed. So this is the option. Now you can see here, it is, you are entering the data, it is collecting and displaying that information. It is collecting and displaying that. You change, you say subscribe, you say not subscribe. So it is automatically collecting the data. And when I hit on register, it submits all the form data. We can individually handle with the data in the UI. You can submit the data and you can post into any APIs. That part of collecting and posting data into API is the second thing we will see. But very important, before submitting the data, we need to verify, is this data correct or not? If data is not according to requirements, then we should not allow to submit. Then what is it called as? Validation. That means we need to validate the form before submitting the form. So this is simple point of submitting data. First, let's take this example. This is an example. We have a template form dot component dot ts. In ts we have only one small method. Template form ts have only small method here, that is submit click. And template form component HTML. Now your view is very heavy. Everything you defined in the view level. This is user interface. Everything configured in the view. View becomes very complex. It is difficult to extend. It is difficult for testing because logic, design, everything integrated at in one place. And it is also very heavy for rendering the output every time because it is too many things to handle at the interface. This is a template form. Already we know how to work with the template forms, but today you saw extra how to configure form, how to configure elements, and how do we submit. Now here the question is how we can validating template driven form. How to validate template driven form. Technically, what is validation? Validation is the process Validation is the process of verifying user input. Validation is the process of verifying user input. Why to verify user input? Validation is required to ensure that contradictory and unauthorized data is not get stored into database. That is the main reason. Why you need validation? What is validation? Validation is the process of verifying the data that user inputs. What you are verifying? We are verifying and making sure that contradictory and unauthorized data is not submitted. Contradictory means the data type that we are expecting and the data type they are sending are not matching. So unauthorized means we set certain limits and they are crossing the limits. That is unauthorized. That means I said 4, they are sending 5. So that is unauthorized. I said string, they sent number. That is contradictory. We need to prevent contradictory and unauthorized data to come. So, and we need to restrict the data. For that, we need validation. Actually, how validations are done in JavaScript and jQuery? In JavaScript and jQuery, validations are done by using custom functions. That means JavaScript and jQuery handles validation by using various functions. For example, I want to verify the value is a number or not. Then what to do? In JavaScript, I want to verify the input value is a number or not. Then what to do? In JavaScript, how you will verify that input value is a number or not? For that, we use a function isNaN. Is not a number. How we know the data type of any value that is coming? How we know the data type of any value that is coming? In JavaScript and jQuery, we have to use type of operator. Type of is an operator which is used to verify the data type. Is it a number? Is it a string? Is it a boolean? That means how you know whether the value is within 4 characters or not. We have to use the property like length. Right? How do we verify the value entered or not? How do you verify whether the value entered or not? That means we need to use string empty. Actually, string empty is verified just by using string is equal to empty. String is a predefined object. You know, string object contains so many things. So that means now how do you verify? How do we verify is there at least one capital letter or not? How do you verify is there at least one capital letter or not? We have to use regular expression. We have to use match method. Am I right? So much work is that. That means if you have learned JavaScript, you know JavaScript jQuery requires a lot of functions and properties for validation. But what is specialty about Angular is Angular provides predefined validation services. Angular provides predefined validation services. You know, service means it is already built up. You have to just inject and use it. That means the speciality of service is already it is wired up with logic. It contains ready-made functions and functionality. Just you have to use those services. You have to use the services. And the speciality about validation services is, so actually validation services can directly run on HTML validations. They can directly run on HTML validations. That is very good. Directly run on HTML validation means, what are HTML validations? For example, you have input type text. For this, what are the validation attributes? What are the validation attributes provided by HTML for text box? What are the validation attributes provided by HTML for text box? The validation attributes provided for text box, we have required, we have min length, we have max length, we have pattern, you know. These are all the HTML validation attributes provided by HTML. These are all HTML attributes. Every HTML element have required, every HTML element have min length, max length, patterns. I hope you learnt all these in HTML itself. HTML have required, HTML have min length, HTML have max length, HTML have pattern. These are all validation attributes. You know, these are all validation attributes, right? Can you tell what are element state attributes? Element state. What are element state attributes? For element we have state attributes also. What are element state attributes? These are element validation attributes. These are element validation attributes. What are element state attributes? Element state attributes we have like read only. We have like disabled. We have like autofocus. Focus. All this comes under element state. So is it enabled or not? Is it read only or not? Is it focused or not? All these are element state attributes. These are validation attributes. These are element state attributes. Element state attributes. That means HTML5 have provided so many things that Angular is satisfied with them. It can just use them and validate. That means you don't need anything extra. But during some requirements, we are not satisfied with the attributes it provided. In that case, we have to write our own validation. That is what people call as custom validation. Custom validation. That means if any validation method is not configured by HTML, then you have to write custom validation. Custom validation. We have to write our own validation. That means if any method is not configured, then you have to write by yourself. But majority of validation methods are already available with HTML, and Angular can use those. Angular can use those. So what is specialty in Angular is Angular provides validation services. These services depend on HTML attributes. By using HTML attributes, they can easily validate. You don't need anything extra. But very important is actually the validation services. The validation services are classified into two types. One is we have form state validation. Form state validation services and we have input state validation services. Input state validation services. Form state validation services means these are related to all elements in the form. These are related to all elements in the form, and input state validations are related to any specific element. For example, until or unless all the fields are valid, I don't want to submit. Means until or unless all the fields are valid, I don't want to submit. How to verify all fields are valid or not? That is done by form state. How to verify individual field valid or not? That is input. That means we have two validation states. Entire form is valid or not, specific field valid or not. So that means here form state validation services. Form state validation services. First we will see what are those. Form state validation services. Form state validation services, that means these are the services that verify all fields in the form. All fields in the form, and return a boolean true or false. That means they are not related to one field. Every field they will verify, but finally the result will be true or false. And what are these validation services? We have service, we have property, and we have description. We will see three important things. Actually, the service name is ng pristine. It is used as pristine. Property name is pristine. In the library it is built as ng pristine. And what does pristine means? Pristine means, so form, no field in form. So no field in form modified. No field in form modified. That means all fields are untouched. All fields are untouched. All fields are untouched. Pristine. Pristine means, for example, it's a general word. It is not any technical thing. Na? You know in English, right? That means, so that particular city, that particular place is pristine. That means nobody explored, nobody went there. Pristine means not touched. Nobody touched it. So it is pristine. So that means it is pristine. Pristine means form is there, but nothing happened. No modification happened. No field in the form. That means no field in the form modified. So if any one field modified, if any one field changed, then automatically it is called dirty. Ng dirty. So we define dirty. Dirty means it returns true. It returns true if any one field in form, in the form modified. That means if any one field in the form modified, then it will automatically say dirty. That means dirty will be true if any one field modified. So similarly, we have ng valid. Ng valid. It is valid, and it is nothing but all form fields are valid. If all form fields are valid, finally it returns true. So ng invalid, it is invalid. So that means if any one field is invalid, then it returns true. Invalid will return true. If any one field is invalid, then it says entire form is invalid. If all the fields in the form are valid, then only it says valid. We have ng submitted. We have ng submitted. It is submitted. That means it confirms that form is submitted. That means submit button clicked. It will confirm that form is submitted. So these are the validation services. Remember, these are at form state. Form state means it is not verifying every field individually and reporting every field problem. It is not reporting every field problem. It is reporting all fields together. So you can know that there is problem, but it is difficult to know where the problem is. So you can know that there is problem in the form, but it is difficult to know where the problem. Why you need this? Obviously we need this. For example, I will show you. Suppose you see here, let me keep here, instead of details, I will give form state services. Okay, we will write here form state services, and let me show you first all the meanings. Means I will show you the meaning of every point, what it is. Let me put the details here. First is pristine. Pristine means not modified. Not modified, that means pristine. How to get form pristine or not? We have to get the form name. What is the form name? FRM register dot pristine. Similarly, another. So we say dirty. Dirty means so any one field modified. If any one field modified, it is dirty. How to get that? FRM register dot dirty. Similarly, another option, valid. Valid means meaning is what? Valid means all fields are valid. All fields are valid. Okay, let's verify. Here FRM register dot what? Valid. And similarly, another term, invalid. Invalid means any one field is invalid. Any one field is invalid. How to get the status? We have to get the status FRM register dot invalid. And we have another data term. So this is so submitted. That means form submitted. Here we will put data definition. We can get that FRM register dot submitted. Now observe here. So those status messages. And currently we are not using any validations. Let's put some validation. Username have a validation required. Mobile have a validation called pattern. Mobile pattern is, so it is plus slash plus 91 slash D 10 digits number. That is starting with plus 91 and 10 digits number. That is the pattern. So you see now you see, is it pristine? Yes, because no modifications done. Is it dirty? No, it is not dirty, because dirty will be true if any modification is done. Is it valid? No. Why it is not valid? Because name is required and you are not filling it. So now it says that it is not valid, but problem is why it is not valid, it doesn't say. That means it says that form is not valid. That means somewhere problem occurred. Where that problem occurred, it is not having clarity. For that we have to use another state. What is it? Input. Here it is an entire form. Entire form is invalid? Yes. That means any one field is invalid, it will return true. Is form submitted? No. Now see, I am clicking inside this city and selecting Hyderabad, and automatically now modified, pristine false, dirty true. That means some modification happened. Still valid is false. Why? Because we are not entering username. Now valid is true. Mobile is not given with required. That is the reason it will verify only when you type mobile. That means I am typing mobile. So 987654321. Now you can see still it is valid false. Because as per the requirement, the pattern, it should start with plus 91. Now it is true. Now is it invalid? No, it is valid. Invalid is false. Is it submitted? Not submitted. I click submit button, then it is submitted. Now it will be true. Now why you need these validations? So many things are there. We have to use these validations for various purposes. For example, I don't want the person to click register until or unless everything is valid. Right? I don't want to click register. Register must be disabled and it should be enabled only when the form is valid. Then what to do? Simply for this button, the register button, here we are using a property disabled. Disabled property depends on FRM register. Register is invalid. If FRM register is invalid, invalid is true, then disabled is true. That means if form is invalid, then automatically it will be disabled. Now you see now currently register button disabled. I can't submit. Why? Because currently form invalid true. If I entered the name, it is again enabled. If I entered a wrong mobile number, if I entered any wrong mobile number, you can see, suppose the mobile number is wrong. Any wrong mobile number is entered, then again it is disabled. The mobile number is correct, then it will be enabled. That means you may ask like, why do I need pristine? Of course we need in so many occasions. Why we need dirty, why we need pristine? For example, you have seen so many forms. When you open Google account details, it will show you edit account details. And you can observe that there will be a save button which will not be enabled until or unless you do some modification. We have a save button. Save button should be enabled when you do some modification. If you are not doing any modification, save button is useless. For example, you see here, I am adding another button. So that is save. And I given here class BTN and BTN success. So this is a save button. And I don't want to display this save button until or unless some modification happened. Not only enable disabling, we can show and hide. You know how to show and hide. For that we have to use ngIf. ngIf, when it should display, when it is dirty. That means it should display when any modification happened. Then FRM register dot what? Dirty. That means now see, initially it is not there. And when I do some modification, automatically it will come. Until or unless I don't do any modification, save button will not be there. Not only disabling, enabling, we can even do lot of things, showing and hiding. Not only that, for example, if any field is having problem, then I want to show the form in red color. If any field is having problem, then I want to show in red color. If it is success, everything is fine, green color. You learnt already how to apply dynamic classes. You already learnt how to apply dynamic classes. Dynamic classes, how we can apply. For example, you see this is the form. For the form, I am applying a class called P4, padding 4. Form is having padding 4. That means some gap is there. Padding 4 is having too much. I will keep this as 4. I will change this to 8. Okay, because we are giving more space now. Yeah. Now what should happen here is, when form is invalid, I want to put red color. To entire form background, I want to put red color. Actually, for form here, we can just define, I already showed you ng class. ng class, here we are defining an object. And in that object, class name is BG Danger. BG Danger is a bootstrap class, background danger. Background danger should be applied when it should be applied. So it should be applied when FRM register dot invalid, if it is invalid. Then we are applying, so BG success if FRM register dot valid. If it is valid, we are defining this. That means initially this is red color because it is invalid. Now I entered some details and it is valid. I entered some wrong number. That means I am entering some wrong number. Again, it will be red. Again, I entered the correct number. It will be changed. That means we can dynamically control even the effects. I just given only some bootstrap classes. I already told you we can write separate set of classes and we can apply them. This is validation. And this is form state validation. That means many times people have a doubt like, why should I need pristine? Why should I need dirty? So valid, invalid, okay, reasonable. Why should I need pristine? Why should I need dirty? Because you should know whether it is modified or not. Saving, so not saving, that depends on whether it is modified or not. Right? And if it is valid, invalid, we can apply lot of effects for this. So these are form state validation. It is good. Form state, see, you are not using any extra things. Here you are just using HTML validation. You are just using HTML validation. So that means I am not writing any special function for that. And what is pristine, dirty and all these are services which are verifying whether HTML validations are satisfied or not. So that is the basic of validation, how we can configure the validation. So technically this is good but not great. Why? Because it is showing that form is not valid, but it is not saying why it is not valid. That means why it is not valid, where the problem is, where should I correct, that we have to detailedly tell. That is done by using input state validation. So form state validation means verifying all the fields together. This is not satisfying. Why? Because it shows that form is invalid, but it doesn't show clearly where it is invalid. That means every field we have to verify. Every field we have to individually verify. So see here, this is one example. This is an example here. So this is for validation, form state validation. I'm just showing the services, nothing to do in the controller level, only template form dot component dot HTML. In HTML we have to define. In HTML we have to configure everything. This is all in the HTML. All in the HTML. So form state validation services are used for handling all the fields individually. Similarly, same thing we have input state validation services. What are input state validation services? Input state validation service is nothing but so verifies every element validation, individually. Every element validation is individually verified. And here all are almost the same, only few extra are there? What are there? All are similar. We have pristine, same. Pristine, we have dirty, we have invalid, we have valid, we have extra touched, we have untouched, and we have errors. Errors is an object. Errors is an object. It is an optional object actually. It is an object. What errors object can do is it can access a collection of errors like required, like min length, like max length, min length, like pattern. All these can be accessed by using errors. Required, min length, max length, it is a collection. Errors is an optional feature, and it contains collection of so many validation attributes. That means it is used to verify, is it required problem, is it min length problem, is it pattern problem, and it reports that problem. Every problem is individually verified by using this, right? Now we have to use combination of both input state and form state validation. Now we will see how to use these input state services, how to validate every field and display message. That means if username is required, it should show below. Name required, mobile required, name not valid, mobile not valid. It should detailedly display the message. That we'll see next session. Tomorrow we will do that. Okay. Tomorrow we can finish the template form. Then we will see how to design the reactive forms. That means model driven. Once we are good with forms, then we can see communicating with API, right? How to post the data using HTTP, right? That we'll see in next sessions. Tomorrow we'll continue. Right.